All right, friends. Well, it's 9:47-ish, and I'd like to welcome us all to this Sunday's Adult Formation Hour. Hello to all of us here in the room, as well as to all of us in the Zoom space, gathering with us virtually. Today is the fourth in a series of our Lenten Adult Formation series. That's really a complementary piece to Larry's Motifs of Crucifixion sermon series. How many of us have had the opportunity to hear one or two or more of Larry's Motifs of Crucifixion sermons? Yeah, absolutely. Pretty much everyone here. It's been quite the trek, right? Quite the trek through all these different concepts and theological bents for crucifixion. And the Adult Formation Committee thought it would be fun to gear Lent to sort of complement that piece. And to think about, in particular, how we have seen historically different artists interpret crucifixion through art, through pottery, through mosaics, and then what that means for us and how that has enhanced our concepts of crucifixion, the ways that we understand that. The first 2 weeks we had Dr. McKee, and then last week we had Megan from A Tour of Her Own. The original plan was that every single instructor this month would be female, because March is, of course, Women's History Month. Alas, you see me today. I apologize. We had a few change of calendar amendments towards the end of the month here. And so next week we will conclude with Reverend Amelia Dress. Amelia Dress is a fantastic thinker, writer, pastor. She's a pastor of a church out near Denver in Colorado. And she's written a book called Faithful Families. And she is going to be with us to specifically discuss two things. The first is how our faith development regarding our concepts of crucifixion changes as we age. So what's an appropriate concept if you're 3? What's an appropriate understanding if you're 10? What's an appropriate understanding if you're 15, if you're 50? But additionally, what that means as our faith develops and moves throughout our lives, right? There's different understandings of ours when we're 40. There's different understandings of ours when we're 60. What that could mean depending on what's going on in our life, when we've suffered loss, when we're going through transition, when we're experiencing joy. And ultimately, joy is hopefully what we will talk about today in our class, which is twofold. The first is the difference between the Catholic concept of crucifixion, where we go into any Catholic church and we see Jesus up there on the cross, and the anti-cross theology that we see, for instance, here at Westminster. And we'll talk a little bit about those differences, but we will also survey a handful of the crucifixion art that we actually have here in our building, in our chapel, throughout our space, even in this room and in the sanctuary. Now there's a few other announcements that I want to lift up before we begin. And the first is that once this season is over, once Lent is over, we will be concluding our adult formation year with classes led by the Therefore Project. And so those will involve, starting just next week even, a report from the participants on their pilgrimage to Alabama. That's at 7 o'clock at night. We will then have Sunday, April 24th, a history of housing segregation and discrimination in Alexandria with the Dr. Kristen Moon, who is a professor of history and American studies at the University of Mary Washington. Then on May 1st, we'll have Alexandria's resistance to and ultimate steps towards school integration. That's with Dr. Douglas Reed, a professor of government at Georgetown. We'll then that night have class by Larry regarding what he's reading. And then on Sunday, May 8th, which is Mother's Day, not Mothering Day, but Mother's Day, we will actually have a conversation about the Equity for All strategic plan for Alexandria City Public Schools, ACPS, how it's being implemented and the progress that's being made, led by the superintendent, Dr. Gregory Hutchins. And of course, here's the other big announcement. We now have 3 gatherings that will take place in the upcoming months for more plays, more theater goings, and that sort of thing. And so the first is to see the play Grace, which is a world premiere of a play based on African American food tradition and the history around the shared table. It's a premiere at the Ford's Theater, and that will be taking place on Monday, April 11th at 7:30. We will be going to see To Kill a Mockingbird on the 28th of June, and then we'll be seeing Hamilton on the 18th of September, and that's a Sunday afternoon. More information about all those will be in the egram, but as those are getting closer, I want to make sure that folks know that those are. Let's pray. Loving God, we give you great thanks for this class and for the gift of your crucifixion, for the way that you have led us to hope, lead us to victory, and lead us to new creation. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Amen. So I do have a couple of slides that I'd like to share with us later, but first, if I may, remember this is the art class, right? And so I am going to actually share from Khalil Gibran, the famous Lebanese prophet, some would say, right? A writer about something he wrote about crucifixion. And this comes from his writings, and this is called Crucified. I cried to men, I would be crucified. And they said, why should your blood be upon our heads? And I answered, how else shall you be exalted except by crucifying madmen? They heeded, and I was crucified, and the crucifixion appeased me. And when I was hanged between earth and heaven, they lifted up their heads to see me, and they were exalted, for their heads had never before been lifted. But as they stood looking up at me, one called out, for what art thou seeking to atone? And another cried, in what cause dost thou sacrifice thyself? And a third said, thinkest thou with this price to buy a world glory? Then said a fourth, behold how he smiles, can such pain be forgiven? And I answered them all and said, remember only that I smiled. I do not atone, nor sacrifice, nor wish for glory, and I have nothing to forgive. I thirsted, and I besought you to give me my blood to drink. For what is there can quench a madman's thirst but his own blood? I was dumb, and I asked wounds of you for mouths. I was imprisoned in your days and nights, and I sought a door into larger days and nights. And now I go, as others already crucified have gone. And think not we are weary of crucifixion, for we must be crucified by larger and yet larger men between greater earths and greater heavens. Now, when we think of crucifixion in the church, where do we often think of crosses that might be within our communities of faith? Where might they be within our plans?
Well, there's one in the sanctuary.
There's one in the sanctuary, absolutely. Anywhere else?
It's the one at the end of the ramp coming off the elevator.
Absolutely, the blessing cross. We'll get to that. Most definitely, that's a fun one. Anywhere else?
We wear them.
We wear them for sure. What about that quilt right there?
Mhm.
Is there one on the steeple?
Not here.
Not here.
Great question. There is not one here. There are on many, but not here. Here, we actually just have a point, inspire. And there is, of course, the cell tower up there. Do you know that that's what we have? Yeah, that's kind of fun.
We've got about 3 different cell phone companies paying us money to use it.
We do. Is that right?
Yeah, because it would change the tax structure.
We were no longer tax exempt because we were earning money
Of course.
on the cell tower.
So,
Mm.
All right, friends, can everyone at home see our shared screen? taking that as a yes. All right, so Crucifixion in Westminster. Does anyone know what the story is of that quilt?
Is it from the Indian group?
It could be. I honestly do not know, but it's been in here ever since I've started to serve this congregation. And I love how it's interesting. There are some churches that intentionally do not have American flags in their worship space. We have them in both the chapel and the sanctuary, and clearly here, as that is woven into that quilt, beautifully made. But that quilt demonstrates a great example of what's called a Greek cross, or of course that ringed cross in the center, right? Here's another example of that. Have any of us seen crosses that look like this, or maybe worn one?
That's like a Maltese cross.
Tell us more.
Well, just that the angles become larger as
Yes.
they go out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the circle?
No, I'm just looking at the actual cross.
Sure. So what's fun with a Greek cross, or sometimes a Celtic cross,
Mhm,
is that these have these circles around them.
mhm.
And the circles, for instance, here, and there are some others in our sanctuary as well, can represent a few things: halos, and also the eternity of the world, the never-ending circle. Greek cross. Is Jesus on this cross? Is there a crucified body on this cross? No. Tau cross. Has anyone ever seen one of these?
Is that one partly broken?
It is. That's a window at a sanctuary in Saint. It's either now I'm blanking. It's either Bartholomew or Basil Basilica in Spain.
Mhm.
It's got to be Bartholomew. And the Tau cross is part of what they've worn on their garb ever since they started as a monastic order back in the 11th century. But the Tau cross, of course, this is one that we've talked about in some of our classes, at least was discussed on the tour I was on at the National Gallery of Art, where it's not the full Latin cross with, the full like that, but it just stops where the arms would be spread out. Sometimes it's referred to as St. Anthony's cross, and also is shaped like the Greek letter tau, right? Which looks a lot like the Latin key. What about this one? The Jerusalem cross. Has any of us seen these? You've got the 4 cross and then the small ones in the wings there, if you will. I have a stole that actually has a Jerusalem cross.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty.
So the Jerusalem cross often is not just a symbol of Jerusalem, but also is the folks who journeyed to there during either the Crusades or as a pilgrimage.
Does this cross have a more militaristic implication because of its history?
Because of that history, absolutely it can, yeah. It's on the arms of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and it obviously protects Jerusalem. So there's both a little might, right? I'd say power that's symbolized in that cross and that crucifixion image. But also, and I find this interesting because it's on a purple stole of mine, is that there's also not just the crusade imagery, but also the pilgrimage imagery. And so there's sort of a journey concept with whenever we see this cross, with this image of crucifixion.
Here's
Or
a
you see it on a
question-
shield.
A question out of just mentioning
Please.
the Jerusalem, what did we say, pilgrimage. Do people add a prefix to their name if they go to the Jerusalem, as opposed to the Mecca, where you add Hajj to your name?
That's a great question. There are people in this room, I believe, who have made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Is that correct? Did you add a name? I don't know the answer to that. No. Absolutely. I mean, it's
This isn't called Stump the Chump, but
No, it's a great question. Have you ever been to Jerusalem?
no, I haven't. I've never been to Jerusalem. I've
Yeah.
never been to Mecca either.
Me neither.
I'm not a Hajj diggle.
I mean, my favorite writing about the Hajj is in Malcolm X's Autobiography, when he writes about how it was the most moving thing he's ever experienced,
Mhm.
because it was the most interracial,
Yeah.
liturgical,
Yes.
worshipful gathering he'd ever attended was his Hajj, which is fascinating. Think of his life in America, and then he lived in New York City, and what that meant at that time is that
Interracial or interreligious?
interracial is what,
Okay.
if I remember correctly, his autobiography
I mean,
states.
we always celebrated Thanksgiving in Denver.
Yeah,
Some churches had organized groups whereby we went to all types of religions, and that was wonderful, very good.
no, that definitely has become a Thanksgiving theme in
Yeah.
America, is
Yeah.
let's do something intentionally interfaith
Yes.
at
indeed.
Thanksgiving, in a former life, I was the president of the Pelham Interfaith Council. And what did we have? A Thanksgiving gathering.
We used to have a rabbi that used to present the homily before the offertory, and it was always called the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh.
Ba-doom.
Excuse me.
No. So we're now at St. Andrew's Cross. Now, here's a question. We see St. Andrew's Cross. This is a crucifixion, right? There's somebody up there.
Yes.
This is, as tradition states, this is St. Andrew. And this is named St. Andrew's Cross because tradition and history gives us that he was crucified in this X shape.
Huh.
St.
Sorry
Andrew,
to go on, but
No.
the St. Andrew's flag is a diagonal.
you're jumping ahead, bro.
cross. I beg your
It's on the
pardon.
next
I'm
slide.
totally sorry. I'm sorry.
No. But patron, St. Andrew is the patron saint of
Ireland, of Scotland.
Scotland. Absolutely.
Sorry about that.
No. And we
I'll
do
be
not
quiet.
only see certain crosses named after saints for the way that they were crucified, named St. Andrew. But this, of course, is the Latin cross, the one that we're most used to seeing.
Mhm.
And who was crucified upside down?
St. Paul, wasn't it? Or not? No,
Stephen.
Peter.
Stephen.
St. Peter.
Yeah.
Oh,
Saint
St. Peter.
Stephen, if I remember correctly, was the first martyr,
Mhm.
and he was stoned, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But St. Peter was crucified upside down. So if you see an upside down cross, and then if you see a cross that's on its side, St. Philip was, tradition gives us that St. Philip was crucified sideways. But here are some images
Mhm.
of crosses here within the friendly confines of Westminster. Where is this?
Baptism.
In which room?
Chapel.
Chapel. Now look at that. There's a few, aren't there? Right? We've got two versions of that Greek cross. One is the Maltese, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
and the other is a bit more plain. It would not surprise me that our, Reformed congregation would have a relatively plain and non-ostentatious baptismal form. More cross crucifixion imagery in the chapel.
Mhm.
Now, what is adorning the cross here?
Crown.
Crown, symbol of
Christ King.
Christ the
Christ the
King.
King, absolutely.
And of course, it's purple
It is,
for the regal color.
for sure. This was taken this week when we're in the season of Lent, absolutely. We also see a Latin cross lower in the white, right? Again, more subdued in the pulpit,
Mhm.
not in the paraments per se, but in the actual wood there. Then, of course, the Greek cross up on the top, but those that imagery is shared on both the pulpit and the font. What are the three things one needs to have a Reformed worship space? Any recently confirmed students? Do you know what those are?
Oh, man. Must be a pulpit.
There we go.
One across.
In a pulpit, a font, a table,
And the word.
and a
Electron?
table.
No, paper.
Yeah. We'll get to some table here in a second. Now, of course, what's this? Christian flag. We have this in both the sanctuary and the chapel. If you are facing the chancel, the American flag in both the sanctuary and the chapel is on the left. The Christian flag is on the right. And this is an ecumenical symbol of mainline denominations, not just in America, but worldwide. Symbolizing unity. White there for purity, blue for baptism, and then red, the red cross for Jesus' blood, victory. Are any of these crucifixes?
No,
No. This is the cross in the chapel, and a little bit different than the cross in the sanctuary. You can see my hand there. I take the picture in the reflection. My apologies. What's in the middle there?
the IHS,
Mhm.
what does that stand for?
Come on.
It is. Jesus, the last thing.
ISH.
We all know, but we've forgotten.
I mean, isn't it something for Jesus? Isn't it
Yeah,
Jesus?
it's something to
Yeah.
do with what he said at the end.
Right, I think so.
So what would those be? What are some 7 last words? It is finished.
It is finished, yeah.
In your hand, I commend my spirit, I thirst. We have chancel crosses here. We do not have a processional cross. Some congregations do, right? And those would be brought in and out every, the beginning and the end of every service. We may, it's TBD still, but we may do a little palm processional, which would be the first time in over 2 years we'll have done anything like that here in a couple of weeks on Palm Sunday. But here we go, chancel cross.
What do the initials stand for?
So somebody says it's in his service.
Oh. mhm.
No. those last-
My understanding is that it's Greek letters for Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I could be totally wrong on that, but that's my
We'll
understanding.
all Google it when we go home.
Seriously, yeah, pull out your phone.
Homework program.
The cross of blessing. Did you bring that up? Now, how many of us know what this cross is for here in our congregation? Yeah, please. Are you who put it up? I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, then tell us.
Oh,
Come
that-
on, this is so fun. I love this.
Well, it was at the time of the 60th anniversary of the church.
Yeah.
And it commemorates the people who have been members of this church,
Mhm.
who have degrees in Christian theology and
Mhm.
service. And it needs to be updated. We really should have Clara Beth's name on there. We should
There
have
we
Amy
go.
Upton's name on there.
Yeah.
And I bring
Rebecca
that up
Gibbons
from
soon?
time to time and nothing has ever happened, but that's how it originated. It was purchased from the National Cathedral gift shop.
Oh, I love it.
And it was donated by Nancy Jane Wilkie's in her mother's memory, Eleanor Burchell, who was an early member of this church.
Well, and if just because I'm not necessarily placing this very well, the cross of blessing is at the bottom of the ramp
Mhm,
coming out of the elevator
right.
on the sort of across from the library-ish down that ramp, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And it is this picture I took does not do it justice. In person, it's stunning.
yeah.
And I love how not only does it it's cross, right? Greek cross with same sides, same length sides, but it really is so true to this location and the Saints of Westminster.
A lot of these people who are on the flight came back for that service that we
Yeah.
had. We had a service and then later a dinner. And no,
It's beautiful.
time passes and people forget how things came about. That's true.
No. I mean, it in the 178-year history of the church I grew up in, I am the only person who has gone on to become a minister. And the fact,
Wow.
and the church was, the church existed before Michigan was a state. And clearly, Westminster is nowhere near that old,
Yeah.
and yet has that many members who have gone on
Yeah.
to. I mean, when we talk about, whenever I see something like that, I think parable of the sower. Who knows
Yep.
the amazing ministry that,
And there
has
were people who
blossomed
were
from this
not
place.
still members. When we, for example, we don't have Tom Toole's name on there.
Yes, it
because
is.
He was,
It
it is
is.
on there?
I
Okay.
only know because I took
Okay,
the picture, but yes.
He was a youth in the church. So yes, he was
Yeah.
a member. Mhm.
In fact, he's not on the, he's lower down in the list, but one of the people whose name's on here is the Reverend Emily Vermond Andrea. And she, almost a year ago to the day, led an adult ed class. And it was wonderful to have her
Mhm.
back.
Yeah.
And to share, I mean, what she shared was how this community really supported her in her call and how she carries it with us, with whatever she, whenever she leads worship, actually, she shared, she remembers the love of this place. So here are a handful of other crosses that we see. We see this beautiful window art in a few different places. I don't know the story about those, but part of me wants to know if they were made by our craft group.
Yeah, I think probably.
Madeline were here. she was
Madeline
like,
Yeah.
Ramsey would know.
She's on pilgrimage.
Yeah.
We obviously have this in the library, the Holy Bible, right? In our pulpit Bibles. And then, of course, when we come in off of the parking lot, we have the PCUSA symbol right there. All of these are, of course, crosses, images that we see every time we come into this space that are not necessarily crucifixes with Jesus' body on them. They are empty crosses. Here we go into the sanctuary. So the sanctuary's paraments are purple and also uniquely have a crown over the cross. To be very honest, I kind of like the ones in the chapel a bit better, but that's okay.
Somebody told me once what the VDMA stands for, but I don't remember.
I get a kick out of the fact that the Jerusalem cross is what we sit on when we're up in the chancel as clergy, right? I like to think of it as the journey that we're all on, and that, as shepherds of the flock, we're leading everyone, ideally to not just the cross, but to the empty tomb, right? Every time we gather to worship. But each of the chairs have that up top in the chancel. Our communion table, here I'll step forward, I'll do this, but you can see that our communion table, our cross, which kind of looks a little Celtic there with the circle, kind of the Greek in the middle, right? That is actually not on the communion table. That is on that, on this shelf behind the pastors, but before the organ console. But here in the communion table, we have crosses on the sides. And then we have these. And then this is not necessarily crosses, but do we know what the symbols are here?
The gospelist. I mean,
Absolutely.
Can you speak up?
We have symbols in the communion table that represent each of the four gospels, as well as this cup and the grapes, which obviously are symbols of Christ's blood and the shared cup. But we have a man, we have a lion, we have an eagle, and we have what's the fourth one? Anybody remember?
Please.
The man is Mark. The eagle is John. I think the lion is Luke. Pretty sure that
I
was
thought
Matthew.
the one,
I'm sorry that the L and the E are covering it up, but I'm pretty sure it's a is it a sheep? We'll have to go down and check.
Right.
Is it a cow? And then our rose window.
Mhm.
I presume the table is one of a kind,
This is a great question, Lee.
unique to Westminster.
I don't know the answer to that.
I think it was made by someone in the church,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Carved by someone in the church?
I
It was
remember
back
the
a
name.
long time. I don't remember.
You might remember.
I don't remember. But I think it is one of a kind. I think somebody did make it.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I know the pulpit is one of a kind because of the way that you can raise and lower
Yeah.
That's very useful.
Yeah.
That's very useful.
Functional, yes.
But up in the rose window again, we have another cross with another crown, but no crucifixion.
Why is it called a rose window?
So my understanding is that all of those circle windows
Yes.
in places of worship,
Mm-hmm.
whether in the front, meaning above the chancel, or in the back, are referred to as rose windows
Right.
because they have you can sort of see the petal imagery
I see.
in this,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And then I sound like Dan Brown, but it all sort of gathers down into that and then flowers out, petals out, if you will. Not every rose window has a cross.
Right.
Pretty.
Architecturally, a round window in a house or something is called a bullseye, but,
That's fun.
yeah.
This is the bullseye cross.
Or at
Here
least
at
it is
Westminster.
in English architecture. I don't know American architecture.
Can we go back to the Gospels, because that drove me nuts, because I know that, and I looked.
Give it to us.
The angel is Saint Matthew,
Mhm.
the lion is Mark. It's an ox for Luke. I kept thinking it's a cow, it's a cow. And I
Nice.
knew it wasn't a cow, it's an ox. And the eagle is Saint John.
Absolutely. So can you say that again for us, please?
Yes.
And you say that again and I'll point to it.
The angel is Saint Matthew.
Right here.
Mark is the lion. Luke is an ox. That's what's behind the word. And the eagle for Saint John.
Right there.
So it really is left
Exactly.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they're almost always in that order.
And every single one of those has a halo.
They're all represented in the book of Kells very clearly.
Ah,
Each
absolutely.
gospel.
Absolutely.
The Catholic tradition is it's a man, a lion, a bull, and an eagle.
Oh.
And here is our PCUSA cross, right? The cross of our denomination. What do we see on this cross?
Dove, the Bible.
Okay, let's see here. We've got a dove.
A font.
Flames,
I heard Bible. I heard font. I heard flames. What else?
Fish at the top.
Yeah, that could be a fish.
Yeah.
There we go.
Mhm.
But it's also the descending dove.
That's
Mhm.
what I see it as,
Right.
But it's
But
also a
both-
fish.
could be.
For
so it
sure.
looks like
And-
a vestment too.
Yeah, that's what,
I never
that's
thought of
always
that
reminded
before.
me of a vest.
Yeah, it
I
does.
like that.
Yeah, that's good. The dove, also the center of it could be a fish.
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
That's what we're saying.
So this is the PCUSA cross cheat sheet. So we see, we named, I think, everything there except the Trinity.
Mm. Mhm. Of course, the Trinity superimposed.
So we have the cross, the pulpit,
Oh, it's like a long.
the dove, the fish, the cup, the fire, and the book, the Trinity. Does anyone have a fun story or memories of when this image was created? This particular cross? I believe it was created after reunion, but I don't know the history.
You're right.
Yeah, that's
Specifically.
that far.
Early 80s.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal when it came out. They produced, anybody remember the transparency things you put on those,
Yeah.
particularly for use with children and youth, like a confirmation? I had a stack of transparencies and we just kept laying another one on top and another one on top.
Oh my
That-
gosh.
that Pulled the pieces in like that. It was really cool.
That is fun.
Wow.
I wish I had a slide that we could do
There was a short time when every confirmand and almost every child in the whole Presbyterian church knew what all that was.
that.
I never remember being educated. I mean, I remember when it came in, but if
Yeah.
I was educated on it, I don't remember that part.
Well, I mean, we not every congregation has, when you enter off the parking lot, a beautifully inlaid in wood PCUSA symbol, and we do. Pretty fun.
You could use that for next year's Youth Sunday.
Youth Sunday. Absolutely, we could. So we have been focused on motifs of crucifixion.
Mhm.
And this actually is a direct copy and paste slide from Dr. McKee's presentation. We have gone to the National Gallery of Art, and we have seen numerous images there in many different medium. And we've pondered throughout the entire year what our relationship individually, our relationship collectively with Christ, as Christ is there on the cross. And the question that's been asked for me to answer, or to at least reflect on a little bit today, is what is the difference between the Catholic understanding of the crucifixion, in particular with crucifix in a sanctuary, and the Presbyterian or more Reformed concept of Jesus not actually being there on the cross, more of an empty cross theology.
Graphics.
Well, the best way that I can respond is by sharing that I went to Marianist Catholic high school. And I obviously at the time was not Catholic, still am not. I am married to one. My brother was raised as a Presbyterian and actually has converted to Catholicism as an adult. And so while everything I'm going to say here is only of the utmost respect for Catholicism, however, as a 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18-year-old, I remember vividly being brought into the chapel of the church, or of the school I went to, with a very graphic, not just a painting, but a very graphic statue of Jesus, piercings, crown of thorns, and being led in very specific prayer mantras. And those all involved thinking about all that Jesus suffered for me. He was whipped, he was beaten, wrongly accused. To think about how horrific it would be to imagine you're getting lashed, they then throw your coat on you. Just as the blood starts to clot, they rip that. And then you're at the foot of the cross there next to Mary Magdalene on the right. And Jesus, in one of his last gasps, gathers up enough energy to look down at you, looks at you in the eye. And what do you say to him?
Forgive us.
And that is what I was taught at Catholic high school, is why we have Jesus on the cross. It's because of everything that Jesus did for us, that's symbolized in that crucifixion. It's a Roman cross, right? He was crucified by the state.
What?
Please.
Well, this is the big question that I've had in mind. In other words, what from the crucifixion, the cross of Christ, the crucifixion, what evolved in history besides the Reformation that caused this transition to the empty cross?
Well, that actually is what I would tell you is the heart of the reform concept of crucifixion. Is because, again, in every single cross that we saw, that are images that we just took a look at that are taken from our faith community, do any of them have Jesus crucified on them? They do not, right? They are of empty crosses. And the empty cross is not necessarily just a symbol of crucifixion, a symbol of everything that Jesus suffered through to get to that point, but also finally symbolize this.
Okay, yeah.
Symbolize empty tomb, empty cross. When Jesus is up there on the cross, and again, this is not to knock at all our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters, but Jesus has not yet, according to the Apostles' Creed, descended into hell, truly defeated death, and then rose again. And when we see these crosses in our Reformed Protestant Presbyterian communities of faith, we are celebrating, we are honoring, we are lifting up more the resurrection, excuse me, than necessarily the crucifixion. This, of course, leads to many resurrection moments that we have in the Bible, right? We have, are you the gardener? Right? We have Road to Emmaus. We have Jesus by the Sea of Galilee many days later, throw the nets on the other side, bring up all the fish, et cetera, et cetera. We have all the way into Acts of the Apostles. And so those are the stories, are the traditions, are the experiences, are the teachings of Jesus that lead us to that as a Reformed theologian. And that, to me, and I would say that to like all just straight up Christianity 101, is the main difference. Is resurrection versus crucifixion and what that means.
Well,
Marty.
I definitely, I grew up with the regular cross, or what I consider the regular cross. However, when I've been confronted with crucifixes,
Sure.
with Jesus on there, I usually blank that out in my faith. I'm more into the joy of my faith.
Mm.
And I find since I don't know, if I had to face the crucifixion every day as part of my devotion and my jewelry, I don't know how it would affect my relationship, but it's easy to forget about all he went through. It
Sure.
is so easy to forget that for me. And I'm just as happy to forget it because I'm more into the joy of life, which I think is a blessing that we should be thankful for.
Yeah.
But and I do feel sometimes I feel a little guilty about not focusing on the pain as much as maybe I should every once in a while,
Sure. We need to get through Good Friday
Yeah.
to get to Easter. And I mean, if we haven't been reminded of that through our entire Motifs of Crucifixion sermon series, we haven't really been paying too much attention,
Yeah.
right? And I don't mean that to be starting, but I mean, there are key components, and many of us, and I'm not calling you out at all, Marty, many of us, are Christers, right? Christmas and Easter.
Yeah.
But there's certainly moments in our faith life that are not just new birth and resurrection. As terrible as it is, I'm thrilled that we have the opportunity to remember that God is there in those moments. And then, yeah.
well, as somebody who was
Jacob, excuse me. Oh,
Oh, Leslie, I'm so sorry.
that's okay. This has been so fun to listen to, all the participation. I just wanted to ask something, or maybe have you comment a bit on when there's Christ on the cross and I guess we'd say pre-reform. I'm not sure I have the terminology right, but there's also an emphasis on Mary.
Sure. Oh, no, Leslie.
yes, definitely.
Leslie, I'm sorry. We are not really getting your connection very well.
But Mary,
There's also such an sort of form.
Mary, Leslie, may you put it in the chat and then I'll take a look at it in the chat. Is that possible, please? Just because we only hear spatterings of your voice. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, if she turns the video off, the sound will likely come back.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you can hear me now, otherwise I'll just put it in the chat. I was wondering about the emphasis on Mary in the when there is Christ on the cross in the pre-reform, I guess you'd call it, or I don't know if it's the right term. So maybe you could speak to that as also a significant difference.
Sure. Well, not originally, but I mean, Mary's role in the Catholic faith is imperative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's important for us to remember that Jesus is not the only immaculate conception for our Catholic siblings of the Spirit. Mary, to be the holy vessel that would birth Jesus into the world, is also blameless and sinless. And the only way that she was born, Mary, Jesus' mom, not Mary Magdalene, but Mary, Jesus' mom, also is conceived by the Holy Spirit in Catholic tradition. So she is incredibly holy, also is one that people can and often do pray to, right? So that if I pray to Mary, I can get, more ends with Jesus or with God, right? Similar to praying to saints. We don't often do that in Reformed Protestant Presbyterianism. That said, there's not really anything wrong. I certainly do have my preferred saints. I don't pray to saints, but I find their stories fascinating. And, exemplified by St. Andrew's Cross, St. Peter, St. Philip. I mean, the St. George Cross is the one that's the cross of England,
Right.
And what did St. George do?
Dragon.
Slaying the dragon. I mean, what a great story, right? So, but they permeate through our lives. But regarding Mary in particular, as the mother figure, the carrier, the bearer of Christ, she is very important to Catholic teaching. Leslie, I don't know if I'm answering your question the way that all that well. Mary Magdalene is another figure that tradition, of course, puts not only at the foot of the cross, but also often with Jesus, and is a great blend, is a great, I don't know if foil is a fair term, but tradition gives her sin. Tradition is feminine, and tradition is one that is actually there present, right? I mean, she's at the cross, disciples bounce. She goes to the empty tomb on Sunday morning, disciples aren't there. And so her faith, even though she is sinless, or even though, she was great with sin, is what ties her so closely to the foot of the cross in not only in those images, but also in crucifixion tradition. There were comments in the room. Yes, please.
Well, I was gonna say, as somebody who was married to a Roman Catholic,
Yes.
I want to say, I think the Roman Catholic religion does lay a lot of guilt on people.
Yeah.
And I prefer the fact that we realize that while we are guilty, that we are forgiven. And there's much more emphasis, I think, in the Protestant church on the forgiveness of our sins. Whereas the Roman Catholic Church seems to just want to beat it into the members of their church that they're guilty.
Yeah. Well, and how, let's take a look at how we ask for forgiveness in our tradition. Do we need to, again, go to an intermediary, a priest,
Right.
and then do things,
Right.
actions, 10 Hail Marys, etc., whatever? Or can we go directly to our divine creator?
And we do have to confess our sins, but we confess our sins and then pretty much immediately we're assured that we are forgiven.
Yes,
I would just like to take a counterpoint to what the ladies are saying.
here we go.
I was working, I built a tunnel between two buildings at the Soldiers' Home here in DC.
Mhm.
And I was going through a very painful time in my life, and I found it very helpful to go into the Roman Catholic chapel at the Soldiers' Home and see the graphic of Jesus Christ. And it would really help my pain to be relieved, if you will. So that was a service that served me at the time.
Well, and let's remember, right? We are, as reformers, in a world where literacy has been made accessible, or at least available to the masses.
Mhm.
Pre-Reformation, not so.
Right.
And what I believe has been a theme throughout these art classes is that each of these grisly depictions is not only, here's this amazing symbolism, but it's also an educational
Yes.
piece, right? Here is the story. I mean, we saw in those triptychs 3 different versions of, here's trial, here's crucifixion, here's resurrection. You had the whole story in 3 panels, right? That's what in many of those Catholic chapels, whether it's Stations of the Cross or whatnot, we are able to see. And so not only, I mean, there's many pieces to all of that, for sure. Any other thoughts before we close?
if
I
I-
just know that I'm doing the baptism, and so I need to end earlier than usual. But anyway, yes, please.
I just wanted to
Good
say
morning.
that I agree with you, that I think it's very important that we understand that Jesus also suffered and he understands our suffering. But there's a difference between that sympathy with the suffering and the laying of guilt on people. And
wasn't
you are in
expressing
danger
guilt.
of going to hell. And
Right.
my ex-husband would say, when I'm dying, I'm calling for that priest because I don't want to go to hell. And you know you have to have that priest
Yeah.
come in
Get there.
and do that
Last
final
rites.
Yeah, right.
absolution before you die, or you're going to hell.
I
And
understand.
I think that emphasis on the guilt and the fear
Yeah,
is
Well,
or in the
really
case-
detrimental.
Haven't we come full circle when you look at the extreme Pentecostal that say, they preach hell and damnation? I mean, haven't we, gone the
Yeah.
other direction, made that circle? So, but I'm coming back to the Catholic faith. I
Yeah.
think there's so much beauty there within the crucifixion that gives us pause, I think.
well, I'll also
And the
make the point
churches.
that a child that's injured and near death has to be baptized before it dies. And that's very important for the Roman Catholic faith.
Yeah, they
Oh,
do
yeah.
that too.
Marty.
Sort of off topic, there's an exhibit of the Sistine Chapel out at Tyson's Corner.
Yes.
And I went to see it Friday.
Mm.
It has all of the panels of the Sistine Chapel, life-size,
Wow.
but you're, as they say, 4 meters apart rather than 20 meters away.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I got the video or the audio, and I didn't see some of the symbolism that they talked about in the audio. The other thing it has that I really didn't pay much attention to because I was so exhausted after looking at these lovely panels.
Sure.
And and there's another part of it, but all of the ancestors of Christ, the little panels around are the ancestors of Christ and saints.
Mhm.
And so they have, I don't know that they have all of the things there, but they have write-ups on all those too. Definitely worth it. If you, I don't know how long it's gonna be there, but it's definitely, for those of us that are of the faith, some of the people said, oh, blah, 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 but they thought it would blow ups. I don't think it's, I checked, it's not blow ups, it's the actual size.
Cool.
And very well done, I thought.
Hey, and any experience I can have to bring me back to the Vatican, I'm in. Right? Let's go. Totally. I do apologize. I know we're ending a little early, but I do need to head out so that I can be with the baptism family. and
Thank
all
you
of
very
that. But
Next
next week, Reverend Amelia Dress will be with us,
Mhm.
and she will be zooming in from Colorado. So she will not be here in person, but we'll have all the screens up and we'll be able to
Well,
make sure that
we'll
we're
be
looking
here.
right. Precisely. So will I. What's fun is because it's an intergenerational topic.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing for family ministry as well as for
I
adults.
think the
So
more
it's gonna be great.
ecumenical and intergenerational you can be, the better.
There we go. All right, friends on Zoom, thank you so much.